Well, hey, thank you for joining me. Have you been thinking of backpacking gear, or you're thinking of replacing some gear? Are you an older hiker and you've been wondering about gear that works for older backpackers? What about the focus on backpacker weight? And is there a gear that's the best for a good combination of weight and simplicity and comfort? You have concerns about whether you're bringing backpacker gear that you may not need? How should you follow the rule of don't pack your fears? Well, if you have these questions or related questions, then this video should be great for you. I'm preparing for the 2025 season, and I'm making this video while reviewing my gear for wilderness adventures. And yes, I'm an older backpacker, just months away from turning 60 years old. I plan to catalog the weight of my gear and also discuss comfort and simplicity, and then also discuss how you can avoid packing your fears and maybe add some anecdotes along the way. All right, so I first want to describe this phrase, don't pack your fears. And here's an example. Years ago, I had a backpacking adventure in a canyon in Utah, and part of the canyon is known to have a lot of poison ivy. And although a lot of hiking can be done in the river in the canyon, there were times when I hiked on the banks of the river, and so there was some probability that I could brush up against the poison ivy. And in fact, I saw poison ivy along the trail. And because there was some probability of encountering poison ivy, I carried my ointment for poison ivy on that trip. I've taken many other backpacking trips now where there's a possibility of finding poison ivy. I didn't bring my ointment for poison ivy on those other trips. Now the difference is having some probability versus possibility. If I pack an item because it's a possibility rather than a probability, then I'm just packing my fears. So as another example, I once backpacked for 4 days in West Virginia when there was a hurricane that blew in from Florida all the way up the East Coast and into West Virginia. And because there was a good probability for heavy rain, I brought an umbrella on that trip. And that umbrella worked great. I had a great time, partly because the trail was empty, since I was the only person foolish enough to backpack during a hurricane. And while there's a good probability for some rain during almost any backpack adventure, the chance for heavy hurricane-fueled rain is unlikely. So I've never carried an umbrella on any other backpack trip except for that one. And having the resilience to overcome some difficult or uncomfortable situation is a good skill to have in life. Okay, so these examples show that a great way to avoid packing your fears or packing appropriately is to do your research before getting on the trail. I knew about the poison ivy and I knew about the hurricane-fueled rain before those trips, and I planned accordingly. So do some research, and that can really give you some peace of mind to avoid that feeling fearful. Okay, so let's jump into backpack gear. And as a disclaimer, I'm not sponsored by any company that makes backpacking gear, and I've purchased all of my own gear. Some of this gear is relatively expensive, but I consider it an investment in an activity that I really enjoy, and I really enjoy wilderness adventures. I enjoy it so much that I even got a tattoo of mountains and canyons on my arm as a daily reminder of where I prefer to be, rather than sitting in front of this computer like I'm doing right now. So this gear is an investment in what I really like to do. Let's get started with the pack shakedown. I'll start with the big three: my backpack, tent, and sleep system. And so here's my backpack. I use a backpack from 6 Moon Designs known as the Minimalist V2. However, this pack is not truly a minimalist backpack that an ultralight thru hiker would use. My backpack has a minimal internal frame, wider shoulder straps, and a hip belt, which make this pack very comfortable. I'm willing to add a little more weight to have a very comfortable backpack. Also, I've had to modify other backpacks that have too many straps and a cutoff or a change, but I've done almost no modification of this pack, which shows that this pack is really very well designed. I should explain that I only have time to get in the wilderness for an extended week or 2 weeks, and then I got to get back to my job. So I like to minimize resupplies in town so I can spend more time in the wilderness. And my goal is to get as far from the internet as I can, which often takes many days of hiking into the remote areas. So I have extended food carriers when backpacking, such as 5 to 10 days. I think my longest food carry has been about 11 days. I've also had extended water carries for a full day or even stretching to 2 days without a water source in the desert. And that's substantial food and water weight. So a minimal internal frame allows me to carry that weight with comfort. I can easily carry 30 pounds of base weight food and water in my pack, possibly 32 to 35 pounds if I really needed to. So a unique feature of this pack is the shoulder straps. So let me highlight those here in the front, which are really great. In fact, it's almost like having a shoulder or a front vest. 2 upper pockets, 2 zipper pockets, 2 mesh pockets. The hip belt has 2 built-in pockets. And I love pockets because it keeps my gear organized, which adds some simplicity while I'm on the trail. Also, I've seen ultralight backpackers, or I've seen their videos, and they use a fanny pack or a pouch moved to the front. I prefer to have a hip belt on my pack, partly for simplicity, just having one pack that I can throw on, rather than having to put on my pack and my hip belt is just less to think about. And I don't think it really saves that much weight by having that fanny pack instead of a hip belt. So I did buy the inner pack liner for 6 Moon Designs for my backpack, as you can see on the far right there. I could use a trash bag as a liner like many others, but this pack liner has a good seal on the top. That adds simplicity, ensures that my inner liner is watertight. In the middle, I should also point out that I have a tall pocket for poles on one side of the backpack, a shorter pocket for 2 water bottles, a stretchy mesh pocket on the back, which is pretty standard on a lot of backpacks these days. And then finally a flat bottom. I really like a flat bottom on a backpack because then the pack can just sit upright when I put it on the ground. Very easy to access the top then. Alright, so let's go on to a tent. I really enjoy my Nemo Dragonfly one-person tent, which has plenty of space for me and my gear. I can pop this tent up in about less than 2 minutes, including the rainfly. That's been great when I've suddenly encountered some bad weather. It only takes 2 minutes to take down my tent so I can get a quick start in the morning. And this tent works with my style of backpacking. I typically wake up before 6 a.m. and I'm on the trail by 6:30. Walk all day with some breaks and lunch and dinner, and then I'll hike for extra miles after dinner, often past sunset depending on the trail conditions and the terrain. Then I find a camp spot just about anywhere with my freestanding tent. So if I had a tent or a tarp with stakes, I would have to be more selective with my camp spots, and it would take longer to set up the tent or the tarp. And I don't want to do that. Also, this type of day lets me to enjoy a scenic vista or a lake or a beautiful waterfall for dinner, and then I can find a warmer spot for camping later on. Lakes are often cold and can be buggy. Scenic vistas are often cold and exposed and windy. Camping in a place where I'm not eating and away from water and away from that scenic vista just reduces the encounters with animals. And in my opinion, single-walled tents always has some issue with condensation inside the tent. I like a double-walled tent that has little or no condensation, which adds comfort. One major advantage is that I don't need tent stakes, so that adds to the simplicity. Tent stakes are always getting lost and will bend or break, and I like to backpack in the desert. In some locations they're very rocky, and there's no chance that stakes can be jammed into the sandstone or the rocky ground. I'll often tie the back line of the rainfly to a rock or tree or bush behind my tent, and then I'll use a rock to hold the front line of the vestibule, especially if there's a chance of wind or rain. Then the rainfly is taut and does not touch my tent, which reduces condensation, improves the airflow through my tent, and this works well, and I don't need stakes. And then I can move my stakeless freestanding tent around the camping area if I don't like the first location that I select. I modified my tent by removing hook fasteners that you can see in the middle. I installed 2 mini magnets that work great for holding the rolled door. I usually carry a ground cloth made of polycro cut into the shape of my tent floor. But in 2025, I'm going to learn how to leave my ground cloth at home. Savings in weight is minor, so that's not a reason why I'm not taking my ground cloth. Instead, it's just more simplistic not to have a ground cloth. There's one less item that floats around in my pack, and when setting up my tent, the polycro ground cloth is very light and often gets blown around with the slightest breeze. And if I move my freestanding tent, then I have to also move the ground cloth. So the ground cloth just seems to be a hassle, and I'd like to not have a ground cloth and make this more simplistic. Okay, so onto the sleep system. I use a down quilt from Enlightened Equipment, rated to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I like a down quilt because it's lighter than a synthetic quilt. A down quilt is useless if it gets wet, while a synthetic bag is more functional while it's wet. However, with my double-wall tent and my pack liner, it's very unlikely that my quilt will get wet, and I don't want to pack my fears. A quilt is lighter than a sleeping bag and more comfortable than a sleeping bag, which kind of feels like a cocoon to me. So I only got a quilt that's really rated down to 30 degrees Fahrenheit rather than a 20 degree or a 10 degree bag or quilt used by others. Less insulation saves weight and also slightly saves some cost. Now, I do agree with others that temperature ratings of quilts and sleeping bags are somewhat too low, especially after you've used your quilt or sleeping bag to some extent. So my quilt might only be good down to 35 degrees or even higher. Still, I think a 30-degree bag is good because I rarely backpack when the evening temperature is going to fall below freezing, even up in the mountains. And if I do anticipate cold nights based on some advanced planning, which I've done up in like the Grand Tetons, for example, I can bring my sleeping bag liner that you can see way over on the right, and that adds another 5 to 8 degrees to my sleep system. I'm okay having one night that's unexpectedly very cold while the rest of the nights are good. It's a trade-off for not bringing more insulated quilts or bag liners and all that. And again, if it's possible but unlikely that I'll have cold weather, I don't want to pack my fears. So I have a Thermarest NeoAir X Therm inflatable sleeping pad that has an R rating of 4.4 for warmth, which is really very good. And about 4 years ago, I had an inflatable pad that had an R rating of about 2.5, but I did not find that to be warm enough. So that old inflatable pad made a lot of crunching noises, like a bag of potato chips when I slept on it, and that was annoying. And so I really like my current pad, and although this pad is heavier relative to some other pads, I really like the comfort of this pad quite a lot. I have an inflatable pillow that's also very comfortable. The pillow has snaps for a strap that I use on my chair, which I'll describe later. I don't need a strap to hold my pillow on my pad because the pillow has some plastic dots on one side that grip the pad very well. All right, so I have some other essential items that I consider to be essential, although not everybody would consider that to be essential. And my favorite item is my Helinox chair with a high back. The chair is a luxury item that I don't critically need, but my chair is extremely comfortable. I have a strap on the back of the chair so that my pillow is held in place. That adds to simplicity. You know, it takes me less than 2 minutes to set up my chair and pillow and pack leg rest system, and less than 2 minutes to pack up. But that extra time that I'm then not relaxing, I'm actually doing some work to feel comfortable, is really worth the extra comfort. And this chair allows me to get the weight off my old knees and off my feet, and just 10 minutes is enough to feel rejuvenated, and I just feel more energetic and happier. And so I'd really recommend a chair to older backpackers in particular. I'd like to share a story about why my chair is so meaningful to me. And it's worth the 1 pound and 7 ounces, 1.5 extra pounds to carry this chair. So once upon a time, I brought my chair on a backpacking adventure in the Sawtooth Mountains in central Idaho. I backpacked there in early July, and it was a heavy snowy year, so there was still a lot of snow on the trail. And it was exhausting to walk in snow or post hole knee deep through piles of snow, and I was climbing and descending these giant 6 to 8 foot tall snow domes that were on the trail. I finally got to Barren Lake, and I pulled out my chair and I had a quick lunch, and my chair was so comfortable and I was so exhausted that I fell asleep for about 20 minutes, which I've been known to do on many other times. This is not the first time I fell asleep right after lunch. But I was just exhausted on this particular trip. And I remember waking up, and it felt like my body was still asleep, just comfortably relaxed in the chair with my legs resting on my backpack. And although the temperature was cool, the sun was warm on my face, and I looked over this beautiful alpine lake and the snow-capped mountains on the other side of the lake, and it was almost disorienting, you know, like I just had this blank mind, and I was just taking in everything all around me. And then for a second, just for a split second, I thought, you know, this could be what it feels like to die and go to heaven. And of course, I knew I wasn't dead and I wasn't hallucinating, but I could just imagine it. And I couldn't imagine any other experience that could be any better than this for going to heaven, right? It was a heavenly experience. And I really mean that seriously. I'm not very religious, but you know, it's truly one of the few spiritual moments in my life out there in the wilderness. And so, you know, I routinely call my chair the chair. All right, but this story explains that if you really ask me what the chair is called, I call it the chairway to heaven. And that explains why I'm very glad to carry my chair. All right, some other essential gear. I like to carry a paper map in my shorts pocket. There are many apps for maps these days. A map app on your smartphone. A map app, kind of a fun word to say. But I actually like fold-out maps. You know, the old school maps that we had years ago. It allows me to view the entire landscape around in a large view, and I just feel more comfortable with the entire landscape. And the view on the smartphone is more limited, you know, it's just this very narrow display. So I had to laugh when I recently purchased some new maps from Trails Illustrated for an upcoming backpacker adventure. I'm going to go to the Tahoe Rim Trail. And, you know, you can see what the maps look like right here. In fact, well, you know, this side right here is not too interesting with Lake Tahoe. But, you know, if you were to look at the part that is interesting, the actual map there, well, it's about the size of my iPhone now, right? Okay, a little larger, but certainly a narrow, myopic view. And I guess modern era of backpacking is more myopic than in the past, and I'm just going to have to adjust. Sometimes the old backpackers have to learn the new ways, right? Okay, so some other essential gear. I carry a small waterproof wallet from Chicken Tramper. I used to carry a tiny plastic bag, and you know, plastic bag works fine. I just think Chicken Tramper is a cool company, and I wanted to support them, and so I placed my wallet in a small zippered compartment in my pack, and it works just fine. So I carry my car key in a small zippered inner pocket in one of my front shorts cargo pockets, which is super safe and always attached to my body. I never open that pocket until I get back to my car. I never store anything else in that pocket, so I'm not tempted to open up that pocket. And I have to admit that I go through an entire trip and completely forget that I'm carrying my car key in that little pocket until I get back to the car. Okay, I'd like to talk about this camera tripod that I have. It's great to use on the trail. The tripod has a magnetic fitting on the top right here. It stretches out to about 9 inches, and you can easily put my GoPro camera right on there, snap it on, and unfold the legs and put it down on the trail and get some video. I can also use this as a selfie stick. That works out pretty well too. And it's just a nice diversion from the monotony of walking to take some video along the trail. And I enjoy the photos and videos when I return home. It's not a very tall tripod, but it collapses really nicely and fits within one of my shoulder straps, so it's very handy and convenient. Now, if we were to go back to the slide, I also have a Casio watch that's rugged and relatively inexpensive. It relieves me of the concern of damaging a more expensive watch. My watch has an altimeter and a barometer, and that has been handy in the mountains. My watch also can remind me of the time for the sunrise and the sunset. And I thought when I first got the watch, well, why do I need to know the sunrise time and the sunset time? I can just kind of remember that, and I can watch the sunrise and watch the sunset, and then I'll know approximately what time the sunrise and sunset is for the next day. But to be honest, it's just more simplistic to look up the time for the sunrise and sunset on my watch, and I don't have to remember. So I think that's actually kind of cool. That's a helpful feature. I don't use a stopwatch or timer while on the trail. Part of the reason to get on the trail is to get off the clock, if you know what I mean, right? All right, so I use trekking poles on all trails, even flat trails, because my knees are old. And here's a story about why I think trekking poles are essential. I was backpacking in the Grand Canyon years ago without poles, and my knees got really worn out, especially with the descents. Descending is tough on the knees. And that detracted from enjoying the trip, and I couldn't walk normally for about a week after that trip. I like trifold poles rather than the bifold trekking poles. Sometimes those are called Z-fold poles. The bifold poles are about 24 inches long when they're folded, and my trifold poles are only 18 inches. These trifold poles will pack up nicely and fit in my tiny day pack. And I don't always use my trekking poles when I'm walking around town with my day pack, and yet it's really nice to have those poles available if I really didn't need them. Having adjustable wrist straps can be very helpful, so you can adjust them when you're going downhill versus uphill, and also the height of the pole you want to make a little bit longer when you're going downhill, a little shorter when you're going uphill. I like aluminum poles because they are less likely to break than carbon fiber poles. Now you'll notice that the poles I'm showing here have rubber feet. I take the feet off the poles while I'm on the trail, but I keep these feet on my poles when I'm training on paved trails and hilly sidewalks to prepare for the backpack season. I climb and descend stairwells in my office building to get my legs in shape for backpacking season. And so having the rubber feet is essential for hiking stairwells and office buildings. So, as an important point, I don't count my watch and my trekking poles as part of my base weight. I'm wearing the watch on my body just like I'm wearing clothes, and I feel my poles are resting on the ground about half of each step, so I'm not actually carrying them full time. And I've heard that it's been scientifically proven that trekking poles reduce your energy output by about 4% while on the trail. So considering that my body weight and the clothes that I'm wearing and my base weight and the food and water are all around 240 pounds, well, 40% or 4% of my energy expenditure is moving about 10 pounds. I'm not sure if that means using trekking poles is equivalent to reducing my total weight by 10 pounds, but it's an interesting point. You could think of this in this way. Either I could go on a diet and lose 10 pounds, or I can use my trekking poles. I use trekking poles. Okay, working on cataloging my gear, I was surprised to learn that I have almost 2 pounds of electronics. And that shouldn't be surprising because electronics are heavy, but I was still surprised. When I watch videos of ultralight thru hikers, I've noticed that they carry similar electronics that also weigh about 2 pounds or even more from my estimation. So it seems unlikely that they can keep their pack weight below 10 pounds or a super ultralight weight of 8 pounds or 6 pounds if they have 2 or more pounds of electronics. I've also noticed that sometimes they don't count their camera gear as part of their base weight, perhaps because they place their camera equipment in a pouch on their front rather than in their backpack. I think that everything should count towards your weight. And yet, I think this is a good reminder that different people have different definitions of what a backpack base weight should be. It's somewhat subjective. So for my electronics, I use a Rovivon Aura LED flashlight, one of my favorite pieces of gear, shown right here. I think it's easily the best flashlight I've ever used. It weighs almost next to nothing. It has 4 brightness settings plus a red light setting at night. It has a clip for attaching the flashlight to my hat so I don't have to carry a headlamp. It has another cool feature. The flashlight glows green for about 10 minutes or so after I turn it off, so that the flashlight is easy to find in my tent pocket at night if I need to quickly find it again. Flashlight is rechargeable, so I no longer need to carry batteries, which is also very nice for adding some simplicity. I don't have any equipment that requires a battery now. Instead, I carry a Nightcore portable charger. The 10K milliamp version is great, and I've never needed more than the 10K milliamp battery, even on a 10-day or 11-day trip. I have to admit, I turn off my iPhone for the majority of my trip. I'm not using my iPhone as a map. I almost always have my iPhone in airplane mode when it is turned on, and I've heard of others even changing the screen to be grayscale and having it on low brightness to save battery life. I think that's a good tip as well. So I save a lot of my iPhone battery power during my backpacking, and that helps to then also not need the Nightcore lithium battery as much as others might need. I also carry 3 GoPro batteries and a charging kit, along with a 4th battery that's in my GoPro camera. Unfortunately, a GoPro camera uses a lot of battery power when making videos. I use a GoPro camera, partly because I want a camera that is basically indestructible. I also have a huge 512 megabyte memory card that's almost impossible to fill up on a long trip. So I don't have to carry a spare memory card, and that adds a lot of simplicity. I have a flex tail pump, shown right here, which is good for blowing up my inflatable pad. And I have to admit this is a luxury item, but at the end of the day, when I'm tired, it's great to use a pump for about 1 to 1.5 minutes to fill my pad, rather than blowing into my pad about 25 times and wearing myself out in the thin mountain air and feeling slightly dizzy and so on. I've heard that blowing into an inflatable pad will add moisture to the inside of the pad, which lowers the warmth of the pad, and possibly you could get bacterial infections into your pad by blowing into it. I'm not sure if you're going to infect your inflatable pad with bacteria, but I do think it is helpful to avoid getting moisture inside your sleeping pad, so that it's a warmer pad. So I got a larger FlexTail pump, which also has a light that works well as a mini camp lantern. My Rovivon flashlight is more of a directional light, and the mini lantern will illuminate the inside of my tent much better. And while I try to remember to don't pack your fears, I have had a flashlight stop working on a wilderness adventure many years ago, not my Rovivon flashlight. And it was pitch black and night conditions in a tropical forest, and that was frustrating. So having two light sources is just nice in case one light runs out of power. So I have to admit that sometimes I do pack my fears, but only if it weighs a small amount. So I have two cords with USB-C ends. A USB-C has sort of a more oval shape than the USB-A, which is rectangular. I only use USB-C cords now on all of my gear. That adds simplicity. Now my iPhone does use a lightning connector. Oh yeah, and then my Rovivon needs a micro C USB connector. But I have these little adapters that fit on to my really tiny cables. And so then I can convert an end to lightning or micro USB, which adds simplicity. So I don't have a bunch of cords that I'm untangling in my electronics kit. I also have a wall charger shown right here that charges very fast. The charger has two USB-C ports, so I can charge two devices. However, it does take twice as long to charge two devices relative to one device. You don't get, double boost coming out of the adapter. So two ports don't improve my charging speed when I'm in town, but at least I can plug in two devices and then attend to something else. Then I have an iPhone 13, which weighs about half a pound. I think it's an essential item, even though it does weigh a significant amount. I like to listen to jazz music on the trail, so my earphones and my phone work well. Okay, so then in the bottom of this display here, I've got kits, right? And I've got various kits to keep my gear organized. I have a head kit, a first aid kit, a poop kit, a toiletries kit, and a repair kit also. And they're all pretty minimal. For my head kit, I have the earphones that I've mentioned earlier. They are rather simple. I like the version that has a little button on the cord so that you can change the sound level. I also have a bug head net that I use surprisingly often. It's much more comfortable to hike along a trail near water or swampy areas with a bug head net when there's lots of bugs in the area. I also carry a strap for my eyeglasses, especially if I'm canoeing or kayaking or rafting. Once spontaneously hitched a ride on a boat to save me about 3 miles of backpacking, and I used my eyeglass strap on that bumpy boat ride. You could say, well, you're packing your fears because it's very rare for your eyeglasses to slip off, but an eyeglass strap weighs next to nothing. I also have a hat tether that clips my hat to the back of my shirt. Again, maybe I'm packing my fears by worrying that my hat's going to fly off my head, but for example, I was recently in the Grand Canyon and hiking rim to rim, and clipped my hat to the back of my shirt, and it was so nice just to flip off my hat and let my hat dangle off the back of my shirt or on my backpack while I wiped off my head. I'm losing my hair, so I got more head space to have to wipe off these days, and then I could put my hat back on. So I just really like that hat strap. It's really great to have a chapstick. Whenever you're in the mountains or in the desert, you're inevitably going to get chapped lips, or at least I do. All right, so my repair kit is rather minimal, perhaps because I don't want to pack my fears. I have some tape for patching my gear, and I've used that multiple times. I have some wire and floss for binding gear together. I have a small sewing kit. I have to admit I rarely need to stitch things together on the trail, but it's just nice to have. Weighs very little. I have a little emergency whistle, and I've never used that. I've been thinking that maybe I should ditch the emergency whistle. Now I have an aluminum tube that I've carried for over 30 years in case my tent pole breaks, and I've never used that pole, but it's just kind of a nice item to have. And I always carry 25 feet of thin rope or cord. 25 feet of rope has many uses, such as serving as a longer cord for my tent rain fly. I've used 50 feet of rope to lower my backpack off a cliff wall in Utah, so I could scramble down the wall without my pack. So you get the idea that cord has a lot of uses. All right, other kits. Well, I have a minimal first aid kit. I like Leuco tape, really great stuff that sticks to skin extremely well. I put Leuco tape strips on wax paper that you can find in shipping boxes from Amazon or other companies. That way the Leuco tape stays sticky on the wax paper, and you don't have to roll it up into a tight roll, and then it's kind of hard to take apart. I have some antiseptic wipes, but I've rarely needed these, and to be honest, a wet bandana will clean out most scrapes that I have on the trail. I have a plastic Tic Tac box that I filled with Advil and Imodium, which is surprisingly watertight and it's light. I really like empty Tic Tac boxes. Well, I don't wear sunglasses because I would need prescription sunglasses, and that gets expensive. And I find that I seldom need sunglasses in the wilderness anyway. And I just don't want to carry around another pair of some fragile item in my backpack. Instead, I have these items called eye covers. You can see these eye covers way over here on the far left. And for example, when I did a trek in the Himalayas in Nepal, for 2 days, we had a few inches of snow, which was blindingly white. And so I used my eye covers on my first aid kit, from my first aid kit, to convert my eyeglasses into sunglasses. And then not having to carry sunglasses and just carrying these little eye cover plastic films really adds simplicity to my setup. Okay, for my toiletries, I have a small towel that's 9 by 18 inches, which I cut from a backpacker's chamois towel that was 3 or 4 times larger than that. Never really needed more than just a hand towel to kind of wash off my body and my face. And I also carry a disposable razor with a handle cut off so I can shave every few days, which helps me feel cleaner on the trail. I'm just one of those guys that likes to shave rather than grow a big beard. I've got a Visine bottle that I filled with eco-friendly soap. As a nice hack, take a pin and put it in the top of the Visine bottle. Make that hole a little bit larger so that the soap can come out a little bit better. The soap is more viscous than Visine solution. But those little bottles are really nice and will last at least a week or 10 days. I bring toothpaste tablets in a Tic Tac box that I've cut to size, which saves some weight. I don't have any fear of running out of toothpaste on the trail if I count out my tablets. Now, I do agree with those who say that the toothpaste tablets do not work as well as regular toothpaste. But with a little bit of water in your mouth and a toothpaste tablet, you get that foamy feeling going pretty well. I think the problem is when people try to brush their teeth with a toothpaste tablet and their mouth is dry. And then it just feels like chalk within your mouth. I carry a travel toothbrush that has a cover for bristles. As a general rule, I prefer to keep my fingers out of my mouth. So I don't use a toothbrush with a short handle, which is almost always, cause me to get fingers into my mouth. And, does it save that much weight? No, I think it's fine to use a travel toothbrush with a handle. The handle works as a cover for my toothbrush. Okay, I've got some Q-tips, which keeps my ears clean. I just think that helps out on the trail. I've got a multi-tool that is similar to a tiny Swiss Army knife, but also has nail clippers and a nail file. This tool has scissors, which are surprisingly handy in the wilderness. I rarely need a knife, but there's a small knife blade in case I need to cut cheese or salami. The tool weighs about 2.6 ounces. I actually have a small Swiss Army knife along with a small nail trimmer that collectively weigh 1.9 ounces. I like carrying just one tool. I like the simplicity of just having one unit. Okay, finally for my poop kit, I have a bidet water bottle attachment that I can put on my water bottles, which squirts water sideways to clean off my backside. I've got a double deuce trowel that's very light. I've got this black bandana that I use to protect the palm of my hand when I push the trowel into the ground. And I'm pretty good with a bidet, but sometimes it's nice to have a small bandana to wipe off my wet butt. You don't want to be walking around with a wet butt on the trail. And I don't carry toilet paper. I've discovered areas where other backpackers have made a mess with holes in toilet paper, which totally violates the leave no trace ethos and just turns me off from even carrying toilet paper. I also carry a small bottle of Prel hand sanitizer. All right, food and water. For my water system, I use 2 smart water bottles with 1 liter capacity and with a screw cap lid. The flip cap lids look like a sports bottle, are pretty cool, but those will break. And so I've avoided flip cap sports style water bottles. I also carry a small water bottle that has a capacity of about 1/3 of a liter. And I placed a small bottle on my vest strap on my backpack. That's very convenient. I can get 4 or 5 gulps of water from that small bottle, so I don't have to reach around and grab a big bottle out of the back. Like many other backpackers, I have a C-neck bladder with a wide end for scooping water and a small end that fits onto my Sawyer Squeeze water filter. It's a great bladder, carries 2 liters, so I've got a total of 4.3 liters of carrying capacity. I think it's better to estimate the amount of water based on hours between water sources and not miles. After all, hiking up a steep trail or a mountain pass can be slow, like a mile, 0.2 per hour, while hiking down on an easy trail can easily be 3 miles an hour. And so I need the same amount of water during that hour, regardless of whether the distance is 1.2 or 1.5 miles or the 3 miles going downhill. I've gone on a day hike in a desert area such as Buckskin Gulch in the Arizona-Utah border area. And I'll suspect that I'll encounter backpackers and hikers who are low on water. And so I'll even carry up to 6 liters of water on a day hike. And that way I can give some water to others. In general, though, again, 4.3 liters does fine for me. I like the standard Sawyer Squeeze filter, not the mini squeeze filter, which can clog more easily. I've had to use some rather nasty water sources in some desert environments, so the standard size works better. I think the Sawyer brand filters work better in these dirty water sources relative to other filters from other companies. As a suggestion, I keep my water filter and my electronics in the foot box of my quilt to keep them warm at night. The battery power lasts longer when the electronics are not cold, and the microfibers in the water filter will crack if the water freezes in the filter. And there's no way to know if your water filter is busted until you get sick. I do carry Aquamira drops for sterilizing bad water. It takes 15 to 20 minutes for the drops to kill the bugs in the bottle, so you have to have some advanced planning. Once upon a time, many years ago, I was bicycling in the Yukon and somehow I got sick after filtering water from a beaver pond. Go figure. The beaver pond was not that clean. And so I constantly threw up for about a day, and I couldn't eat anything for another day. And I was riding about 80 miles each day on my bicycling trip. So I was in rough shape. And one experience like that will make you carry 2.8 ounces of Aquamira. So it only takes one bad experience. Again, I don't want to pack my fears, but Aquamira is kind of an exception because I just want to avoid those infections in the backcountry. Okay, so for food, I prefer to cold soak, and therefore I don't bring a stove or titanium stove pot or a stove cup. And that saves weight, and I don't have to be concerned about fuel, and that adds simplicity. And I have a protein shake in the morning, followed by Bobo's bars and Pro bars and other healthy energy bars during the day. For lunch, I often have a tortilla sandwich or some other kind of cold food. Now for dinner, I soak couscous, rice, beans, mashed potatoes, ramen, other similar food in a jar along with spices and other ingredients. It takes about 2 to 3 hours to cold soak a meal to get it nice and soft. So I only need a mixing cup for my protein shake and for my cold soak meal for dinner. And I like to use a Helix cup as a cold soak jar. Now these Helix cups are designed for a rec center or a gym where you want to mix up a protein drink while you're lifting weights and so on. And I've put another video about my modified Helix cup on YouTube, and I'll put the link in the video description for this video. Most importantly, the Helix jar has a helical shape inside. And that causes the water and protein powder to mix together much better. And I've never had a chunk of chalky powder that didn't get mixed with water or a hard nugget with cold soaked food in my dinner. I got a titanium spork that I got as a gift. To be honest, I could easily use a plastic spoon like others, but I like this gift because it reminds me of my very kind friend when I'm on the trail. I cut the handle of the titanium spork so it fits in my Helix cup, even when there's food in the cup for cold soaking. Now, as a tip, cut your titanium spoon or your spoon just so it fits within the cup and maybe even has to bend slightly as you screw on that top. That tension will hold the fork in place and so it won't rattle around in the cup, which gets a little annoying when you're on the trail. I really like an earth sack, which can carry 7 days of food. And I also like to buy or make rather dense food, so I can get usually about 1.25 to 1.5 pounds of food per day. That's 100 calories per ounce. I need about 2,000 calories per day, maybe a little bit more. So a 10-day food carry, well, that'd be 12.5 pounds. And yet I can fit that all within my earth sack and carry my first day of food with me. I use 2 odor blocking off sacks for food. Sometimes I switch them out after a couple of years because I think they get kind of odorous inside. And let's talk about clothes. And so I feel like there are 2 categories of clothes. There are clothes that I wear and there are clothes that I carry. And I don't count the clothes that I wear as part of my base weight. I wear 1 pair of underwear and I carry an extra pair of underwear if I'm out for multiple days. I think by having a clean pair of underwear, it just helps to reduce chafing. Otherwise, your underwear gets sweaty and there's more of a chance of chafing. So I really like my sun hoodie. It's light and the hood works great for sun protection. As you can tell, I like clothes that are gray or black, so my clothes don't look as dirty as they may be, or maybe I just look dirty all the time, I don't know. And so I have this Patagonia R1 full zipper fleece hoodie. The full zipper is very useful. I don't have to get stuff off my head and put my hoodie on over my head. I can just unzip it and take it off. I've got a wax canvas hat. That's fantastic. I've hiked with a wax canvas hat for almost 40 years. Of course, I've had to have multiple hats during that time. They do wear out. I like a darker hat, which doesn't show the sweat stains. Helps to have a hat with an adjustable strap in the back so I can cinch it down on my head when there's windy weather. I used to have a similar hat that had a longer 4-inch brim, and I thought that would be convenient, but really a standard 3-inch brim works just fine. I love my La Sportiva Carbon TX4 approach shoes. These are shoes used by rock climbers to hike to the base of a rock wall, and then they swap out these approach shoes for their rock climbing shoes, which are more like slippers and would take a real beating on the hike to the wall. And so these approach shoes have a loop at the heel, so the rock climbers can attach their shoes to the back of their hip belt using a carabiner. So I have the bonus of looking like a rock climber. I'm not a rock climber. Okay, so these shoes have a great lacing system and a great tongue, so I can adjust my shoes really well for the conditions that I'm in and really tighten them up if I'm descending. This has been very helpful in very hot weather when my feet will swell just slightly. Not quite an extra half a shoe size, but my feet are definitely larger. And I learned that lesson the hard way with some slightly smaller shoes that were painful after a couple of days of backpacking in the Grand Canyon. So having adjustable shoes adds some comfort. Somehow these shoes are designed like a gasket and they keep dirt and sand and stones out of my shoes so that I never need gaiters, which adds simplicity. Trail runners are also great, but I don't feel like I have as much stability. As an older backpacker, I really value the stability, like having off-road car tires on my feet, and that adds comfort. So I've got these great hiking pants from Cool, which has 6 pockets in the shorts and a 7th zippered pocket inside one of the cargo shorts for my car key. And I love pockets. I love having leggings that I can zip onto my shorts. Other backpackers curse these tiny zippers, but I've had no problems, partly because I clean and lubricate my zippers on my gear. These leggings have snaps at the bottom, which again allows me to forego gaiters. And I have a pants belt, which is not shown here. It helps to cinch up my belt if my pockets are full of all the gear that I'm carrying. And I wear 1 pair of socks and carry another pair. Really only 2 pair are needed, and swapping socks each day helps to keep my feet clean and prevent blisters. I rarely get a blister. As a suggestion, it's important to clean your feet well each night. That really reduces blisters as well. I like higher cut socks, but I have a pair of low cut socks from Darn Tough that I use for hot weather. And I like a sock with more cushion, especially as an older backpacker. As another suggestion for older backpackers, I wear a knee brace on my left knee, and I've now started to wear another brace on my right knee. In general, I don't like Velcro in the wilderness because sand and other debris can collect in the Velcro, but this is an exception because it's super nice to be able to take off and put back on your knee brace when you need it, rather than having to take off your shoe and then having a cylindrical knee brace have to be taken down your calf and over your foot. I don't have any pain in my knees, so I wear these knee braces more as a precaution, especially in hilly environments. I just got back from the Grand Canyon where I hiked the rim to rim to rim. Huge amount of descent and ascent, and I didn't have any knee problems at all. Knee brace power to all you knee brace fans out there. Okay, so then here are clothes that I carry. The other part of the clothing story. I have a small stuff sack for the clothes that I carry, and in general, I don't carry any other stuff sacks because they add weight. However, I like to keep my clothes together rather than them flop around in my backpack, which adds some simplicity. I use a stuff sack as a mini pillow between my knees when I sleep, and that really helps my knees feel comfortable rather than having them knocked together during the night. And that's just another trick for an older backpacker. Now I have a Montbell EX1000 puffy jacket that's super warm and very light. Unfortunately, it's also an expensive jacket, so I really try to take care of this jacket, always keep it within its own little stuff sack. I guess I should admit that I have 3 stuff sacks. The clothes stuff sack I'm showing here, my Montbell stuff sack, and I'll explain the third one in just a moment. I have a Montbell rain jacket that's also light, Z-Packs rain pants that block the wind. To be honest, I rarely use the rain pants, but they're essential when I need them. So I have a buff that has a lot of utility, and in fact I wear it as a neck warmer or make it into a beanie, kind of fold it around and put it on my head like a little hat, or a light balaclava by stretching the buff over my head so it covers my neck and my head. And for this reason, I don't carry a knit cap or another warm hat. I just carry the buff, and it covers everything, and so that adds a lot of simplicity. I have a pair of light gloves from Montbell, which are perfect for chilly morning. I think these are a really great weight for just the early morning or in the evening. I always carry my small orange bandana, which is about 1/3 the area of a regular bandana. A friend gave me this bandana to me at a cancer fundraising event, and so it has a special meaning to me. I wish it were red because on occasion in the dry desert environment I'll get a nosebleed and my nose will dry out. And a red bandana would hide those blood stains a little better than an orange bandana, but hey, so be it. As a bonus, I wanted to show photos of my shoes after I bought a pair on sale, shown on the left here, and then to compare with the shoes, the same kind of shoes, 600 miles later on the right. You can see the color of the shoes has changed from gray to brown, and there are some worn spots in the vibrant soles at the heel and front foot area. Overall, these shoes have held up pretty well. 600 miles is really pretty good. Trail runner shoes often only hold up for about 500 miles. And so I do like these shoes that have a little bit more life span in them. I think I could probably stretch this to 700 or 750 miles if I had to. Okay, I don't often plan for wilderness adventures in the winter, but sometimes I've been in cold environments such as in the Himalayas or the Grand Tetons or Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where I need some warmer clothes. And I have 2 winter buffs shown in the far lower left corner, one that's fleece for around town, one that has a longer length though, with stretch fabric, which is a Gore-Tex neck liner for skiing and other adventure activities. I have a balaclava that I inherited from my wife, which works great on cold days. I typically only wear this in town where I have a 10-minute walking commute from my house to my office, but it might be nice out in the wilderness. I have a winter cap with no logos, and it's gray, which matches my whole color ensemble. In general, I don't like wearing company logos. I have a pair of winter gloves, and the drawstrings and wrists are very helpful. I got some snow pants that are used for skiing, rarely for some other activities. And perhaps the most essential piece of gear on this display is my base layer top and bottom. They're both made from merino wool with a little bit of a polyester blend. That blend is a little more durable than just 100% merino wool. I like a mid-weight. It has good warmth for the weight and the price. Okay, some optional gear. I have a bear vault for bear country. The BV450 size is too small in my opinion, and I felt the BV500 was rather large. So I have the BV475. I've carried a can of bear spray on some backpack trips in grizzly bear country. To be honest, I'm going to leave my bear spray at home in the future. future, because I've never needed it. I'm packing my fears. I Part of the problem too is that I will fly somewhere in the western US and then I have to scramble to find bear spray before I leave town because I can't bring my bear spray on an airplane. So not carrying the bear spray just adds simplicity. I've carried a wag bag on some trips, which works well for carrying out my human waste. This is essential when canoeing or kayaking because digging a cat hole near the water would eventually get a bunch of human waste into the water. I have 2 pairs of neoprene booties that I like a lot. I have a low-cut pair for hot weather when canoeing or kayaking. I have a higher-cut pair for hiking in canyons in southern Utah where the water is cold and there are many rocks, and this gives me better ankle protection. And I've hiked all day in freezing cold water in Utah canyons while wearing my tall neoprene booties, and they keep my feet warm and very comfortable. I have a pair of paddling gloves that provides the sun protection for my hands. That works great for canoeing or kayaking. I doubt I'd ever wear these gloves while backpacking because my sun hoodie has long sleeves and thumb holes at the ends of the sleeves. That protects my hands. And not carrying sun gloves just adds simplicity. But they are very comfortable and a great way to avoid blisters on my hands while paddling. I've got a pair of binoculars, but to be honest, I can't remember the last time I brought these binoculars on an adventure. Actually, I brought these binoculars on a solo kayak trip on Lake Powell a few years ago, and I have a pair of micro spikes from Outdoor Vitals. These micro spikes have been a lifesaver on some snowy trails, such as that backpacking adventure in the Sawtooth in early July that I mentioned earlier. I also mentioned earlier that I don't carry stuff sacks except for my clothes stuff sack and for my Montbell jacket as well. But my micro spikes are the other exception. The micro spikes tend to catch on other items and they're also dirty, so I like to keep them in their small stuff sack. I want to mention a couple of other items here. The first one is zipper lubricant. I strongly recommend that anyone who does a lot of backpacking or wilderness adventures, especially in the desert, which has a lot of sand, well, you should clean and lubricate your zippers every so often. There's unnecessary gear. Over the years, I find that I just have no longer needed this equipment, which was critical 30 years ago, right? Things have really improved. For example, I no longer carry my headlamp that requires disposable batteries. My Rovivon flashlight is much better. I don't carry my old Katahdin water filter with a pump handle. I spent a lot of hours pumping that bastard. Glad that we have new technology for water filter. I don't carry tent spikes. I like my multi-tool rather than my small Swiss Army knife and my nail clippers because one item offers simplicity. I've got a waterproof match case that must be an antique, perhaps 60 years old. Here's that item right here. I used to carry matches while backpacking as a backup, but I think I was just packing my fears by carrying matches. I also have a thermometer, and it actually records the low temperature and high temperature for the night and the day, so you can see how cold it got at night. Well, I don't really need that anymore because I just know that it gets cold at night. I have an old plastic trowel for digging a cat hole. You know, these old trowels tended to snap and they were heavy, and I'm glad that trowel technology has improved. I don't bring a neoprene bottle anymore. Even at high elevation and freezing cold, a smart water bottle will just work fine. I don't carry a stove or cooking pot since I cold soak my dinners. I don't carry a lighter. That adds some simplicity. Also, I don't carry any moleskin or other bandages because Leukotape basically replaces all bandage material that you would ever need. You know, I don't carry an emergency beacon such as a Garmin InReach device, which is very popular among thru hikers. This is just another example of packing my fears. I've had some harrowing adventures over the years, and part of the experience is discovering how to manage a very bad situation, or how to manage a situation so it doesn't get bad. Also, most of these emergency beacons provide the ability for two-way texting, and I know that I would succumb to using that feature. Part of the reason I like to get deep into the wilderness is to unplug and disconnect from the internet. How much does all of this gear weigh? Well, if I counted everything, including the clothes that I'm wearing, my watch, my trekking poles, and I'm carrying just over 21 pounds. My base weight is really your backpack and the items in your backpack and pockets. And for me, this is 15 pounds. And I'm surprised by this weight because it feels like I'm carrying 12 or 13 pounds. I think part of my misconception is that I have 3 pounds of gear in my front vest pockets. Again, I love pockets. And instead of these 3 pounds hanging off my back in my backpack, these 3 pounds that are on my front is more evenly distributed around my body. And that just helps with my center of mass, and it feels lighter to me. Okay, so could I reduce my base weight? Yeah, I could leave my beloved backpack chair at home, my chair way to heaven. I could forego my inflatable pillow, and my flex tail pump is definitely a luxury item. I could stop carrying my camera and camera batteries and tripod, and that would save £1 pound. I could just use my iPhone, I suppose. I could replace my helium mix jar with a lighter jar, and that admittedly is a luxury item. And then I could go after the big 3, which account for almost half of my base weight. I could get a lighter backpack. I could get a lighter sleeping pad. I could get a lighter tent. And I could probably then get my base weight down below 10 pounds. But as I've explained, many of these items provide me with the comfort that I like. And the simplicity of my freestanding tent and a lot of my other gear is also very helpful. And for this reason, I think I found a good balance between the weight and comfort and simplicity, and I'm rather happy with my kit. You know, as another consideration, I can usually go backpacking for, an extended week or 2 weeks, and carry a lot of food so that I don't have to spend too much time in resupply towns. And so I have longer food hauls, and along with water, I could be carrying as much as, well, let's say 16 pounds, maybe even more than 16 pounds when I start a backpack trip or I leave a resupply. And my 6 Moon design backpack feels heavy at about 30 to 32 pounds, and so therefore I would set the maximum at 35. So I want to keep my base weight around 15 pounds so I can carry that extra weight on my pack. I don't want to add more items to my base weight. Also, I think that those of us who are older backpackers have an appreciation for how great modern gear has become. My base weight in the 1990s was about 30 to 35 pounds. I once completed a 10-day backpack trip on the 100-mile wilderness in the northern end of the Appalachian Trail, and I staggered from the trailhead with about 60 to 65 pounds in my pack. So that's another reason why I feel very good at a 15-pound base weight. I've experienced much heavier gear. Okay, I'd like to share a final thought. So part of kindness is helping others. And if this video is helpful for you, well, then I'm glad that I could show some kindness by making this video. And you can show kindness by helping others to find this video by clicking on the like button. And you can help yourself to find similar content on my channel. You can help yourself and be kind to yourself by clicking subscribe. Really what I'm trying to get to is, in the words of the immortal philosophers Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes! I'll see you on the trail.